Welcome to the first of this year's Professorial Inaugural Lectures. This is the third year that this series of special events has been run. The series celebrates the achievements of our recently appointed professors who have excelled in education and research in their particular fields. Excellence in education and research is at the heart of our work at Essex, and we've established a global reputation over the last 50 years for that work. I just want to tell you a bit about the programme of events this year before I introduce our speaker tonight. So in addition to tonight's talk by Professor Gianluigi Vernasca from the Department of Economics, over the coming year, we'll hear from professors in the departments of Psychology, Health and Human Sciences, Literature, Film and Theatre Studies, Essex Business School, the Human Rights Centre, the School of Philosophy and Art History. A variety of themes is explored in these lectures. As well as tonight's lecture on whether the UK should leave the European Union, themes explored in subsequent lectures are inequality and mortality, how your brain creates your reality, the futures of reading, Kodachrome travels, social pathology, the power of language in organizations, and police and crime in the 21st century. So a variety of topics. Turning to tonight's lecture, I'm delighted to be able to introduce Professor Gianluigi Vernasca from the Department of Economics. Gianluigi initially studied economics in Italy at the University of Parma, but came to the UK to pursue postgraduate studies at the University of Warwick, where he was awarded a PhD in 2006. His thesis was on the topic of applied game theory and intergenerational economics. His research interests continue to be in these areas, as well as in industrial organisation. He's taught both in Italy and the UK, and is a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. He joined Essex in 2006. In his lecture tonight, Gianluigi will give a summary of the main costs and benefits for the UK economy and the welfare of UK residents of Britain leaving the EU. He'll talk for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions from the audience afterwards. Following the lecture, there'll be a drinks reception upstairs in the Lakeside Cafe, and everyone's welcome to come. So over to you, Gianluigi.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so, well, thanks a lot for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. My topic today is a very important question that you may have a very strong opinion about it, or maybe not. And is, should the UK leave the EU? Now, spoiler alert, the answer is no. However, why is no? And it's no on a very particular aspect, which is the economic aspect. So there is a huge debate, as you can see also from entering the theater tonight. I received some leaflets, one in favor of UK staying in the EU, the other against, and that's very good. It's very good that students are interested in this kind of question, because these are important questions. It's good that you form your own opinion, that you challenge the common wisdom, but your opinion is not enough. It's not only important to have an opinion, it's how you form your opinion. And so today I'm going to use some economic thinking, reasoning, to try to provide the answer to this question. Now, as I said, there is a huge debate, huge political debate. I'm not going to focus on political aspect of this question, which are very important, by the way. I'm going to focus only on the economic side, which may be a bit restrictive, but that's what I'm going to do. And there is a huge political debate, but in my view, there is no much economic analysis about it, with just few exceptions that I'm going to say something about it. So what the UK would like to have from the EU? Negotiations are going on at this very moment. Started yesterday with Donald Tusk and David Cameron. But pretty much, here I'm summarizing the main economic aspects of the request of UK. And the main aspects are the following. I mean, the first one is to restrict the in-work and out-of-work benefits of EU migrants. Now, the main issue here is that the UK would like to have a 4-year window at the moment. So EU workers may not be able to claim benefits up to 4 years since they start working in the UK. But the main aspect here is simply to try to reduce immigration from EU into the UK. That's fine. That's a possible political objective, and that's one of the things that the UK would like to have. The second very important aspect of the UK and EU negotiations is about excessive regulations that UK and some other countries believe EU is imposing on internal businesses, what they call the red carpet of the Brussels bureaucracy. All right? So the idea here is to have more independence on internal business for the UK. And of course, a very important aspect is to reduce the UK contribution to the EU. That's an opportunity cost for the UK, because the money that is given to the EU budget could be used in the UK for something else, for something that can benefit the UK residents. So the idea of having this referendum that probably will take place in 2017, or depending on how the negotiation in these days will go, maybe also in summer of 2016, this is just a credible threat that can be used by the UK in the negotiation with the EU. Now, it's very similar to what Greece have done last summer, in the referendum before deciding to accept the EU rules. Now, David Cameron in November 2015 simply said the following: the UK may leave the EU if its demands for EU reforms are met with a def here. Now, this is what I meant by a credible threat. How credible is that? We will see. Now, what are the possible arguments of what we call a Brexit, so for the UK to exit the EU? Now, one argument goes with the idea of international trade, so the trade between the UK and the EU partners. So the idea is that even if you leave the EU, what's the problem? The UK will still trade with the EU. You normally trade a lot with your neighbors. UK is a neighbor of many EU countries. Why should that be a problem, right? So even if you leave the EU, trade should not be very affected. Regulation, well, if we can have less regulation, that's better, because market can become more competitive. Less regulation normally implies more free market and more competition, and this can have benefit impact on UK businesses. Immigration, of course. I mean, you reduce the benefits that you can give to foreign workers, and so you have an opportunity cost. That money that goes to the EU workers in terms of benefits can go to UK people. That's absolutely fine. Finally, the fiscal impact. If you don't give the money to the EU budget, you can use that money to do something else in the UK. So these are all reasonable arguments. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to discuss each of these four. I'm going to focus on these four because I think these are the main economic aspects that we have to focus on. All right? And for each of these arguments, I will try to look at the costs, possible costs, and possible benefits of a Brexit. Now, from an economic point of view, to answer the original question is a yes or no question, so it's not a very difficult question. The framework that we normally use is very simple. You look at the cost, you look at the benefits. If the benefits are higher than the cost, you do it. If the costs are higher than the benefits, you don't do it. That's very simple. What is the problem with this approach? That finding good numbers, estimates for the cost and the benefits of a Brexit is not very simple. And here I give you two examples of two interesting economic analyses that have been done about the issue of UK leaving the EU. One is by Patrick Minford and some co-author in 2005, and according to his analysis, the UK should leave the EU, because by leaving the EU, UK can gain up to, well, a bit more than 3% of GDP. GDP is the total income produced in the UK, for example, in 1 year. It's around 1.2 trillion pounds. Fine. So 3% of that can be given to the UK if they leave the EU. And that can be used in the UK for whatever they want. In another paper, Professor Ottaviano at LSE find out that if UK leaves the EU, they can lose up to 3% of GDP. And this is the same question, and you have opposite answers. opposite answers given by opposite numbers. How can it be that the same questions can have opposite answers? Now, this happens many times in social sciences, by the way. It's not. The reason here is quite simple. It's the fact that in the first papers, they use a particular approach and they focus on particular aspects of the UK economy. In particular, they use what we call computational general equilibrium model. I'm not going to say anything very technical, by the way. While in the second case, they focus mainly on trade by using a gravity equation estimation model. But still, we have very, very different results for the same question. So instead of using very complicated models, which we are famous to do as economists, vector autoregression, nonlinear regressions, dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models, whatever. You can think about the most complicated model. We can use them. We can put numbers. It will spit out a number, and we will tell you that number. Instead of doing that, I'm going to use another important tool in economics, probably the most important one, which is common sense. So I'm going to look at data, because unfortunately, we cannot do anything without looking at data. And I'm going to apply common sense to those data, to the evidence that we can see, and try to infer what are the costs and the benefits, try to compare them, and see what is the answer to the question, should the UK leave the EU? Let's start with trade. Now, international trade is very important. The EU, as you can guess, is the largest trading partner of the UK. Here you have some data that I collected. And what you can see is that the EU accounts for 53%, so the large majority of international trade of UK is done with the EU. And that represents 23% of the total income generated in the UK, for example, in 2014. 23%, okay? This comes from trading with the EU. In 2014, this is the latest time I have the data, the UK had a current account deficit, which means the following. They export goods to the EU, and they import goods from EU, and the imports are bigger than the exports. So the UK imports more goods from EU than they sell to EU. There's nothing wrong with that. And this current account deficit is 6%. Now, but when you have a current account deficit, what does it really mean? The fact that you sell less than you buy. What does it really mean? It simply means that UK residents, at this very stage, tend to live above their means. They can consume more than they actually could if they didn't trade with the EU. Is it good? Is it bad? Well, let's see. So what are the benefits of being part of a single market like the EU single market? Well, economic reasoning, economic theory, basic economic theory, will tell you the following. I mean, being part of a single market can only be helpful for trade because it reduces the barriers to trade. It's less costly for you to trade with your partner if you belong to the same market. Very simple. Economic theory will tell you also that international trade will always make you better off as a country because you can exploit the concept of comparative advantages, which simply means that by trading with others, you can specialize in what you're really good at. And believe me, there is always something that you are really good at. So you can always specialize on that. All right? And by specializing and by trading with others, you create efficiency, economic growth, and economic welfare. So you make people, countries, better off. And that's a fact. That is true since the Adam Smith book on the wealth of nations, and after that by the Ricardian model of international trade. Now, a report of 2014 found out that Britain's EU membership increased its trade, and remember, trade is beneficial. Think about a country that doesn't trade with anyone, and you should think of North Korea. Okay, that's a case of a country that is very closed, right? UK is not very closed. It can trade with other countries, and being part of the EU has increased trade by 55%, creating a greater integration, lower barriers, so enhancing efficiency. Moreover, international trade, opening your economy to international trade will enhance competition, because now firms in this country will face competition from firms in other countries, and you may think that's bad. I don't want that. I want my firms to be the only ones selling the goods. That's not the right approach. Competition is normally good because we are all consumers. We are not all entrepreneurs. And consumers gain from lower price and higher competition. So welfare increases because of high competition. And in fact, some evidence shows that because of the EU single market creation, indeed, industry have become more competitive, and markups, so how much firms charge prices over their cost of production, has decreased. And that can only be good for consumers. The second aspect related to international trade, which is very important, is what we call foreign direct investment. What are foreign direct investments? They're very simple, by the way. These are foreign companies, US companies, German companies, that come to the UK, build a productive plant in the UK, employ people from the UK, produce in the UK, and then they can sell in the UK, they can sell somewhere else, right? That's a foreign direct investment. The good thing about foreign direct investment is that they are normally correlated with skilled labor, so workers that have higher skills, they are high productivity, and with technological progress, R&D. Now, these two things, higher productivity, high skills of labor, research and development, what does it mean? It means higher future growth. Productivity is what matters for growing. So if you want to increase growth over time, foreign direct investment is normally a good thing. So having many foreign direct investment in your economy tend to be a good thing. Now, the good thing about this is that the UK is currently the second largest receiver of FDIs in the world after the US. Why? I mean, the US, UK. How can it be? Reason. A very interesting study by UNCTAD, which is this institution in Switzerland, found out in a very simple manner using some interesting data that the main determinant of why firms create oversized productive plants in another country is the local market size. Now comes the question, US, UK. Now, UK is not that big. So why so many people should come to the UK? There are many, many reasons, but the main reason, which was given by a survey using in this study, is that the UK is attractive exactly because it can enter the EU market, which is a huge market. So the local market size is not the UK only, it's because by producing in the UK, you can sell in the EU. Why the UK and not France? One of the reasons is that UK, at the moment, is very, very little regulated compared to other countries. I'm going to show you in a while. So UK is very attractive to FDI, not because it's a beautiful country, it is. I'm not saying no. But exactly because it can access a large, very large market, which is the EU market. So let's assume that you get out of the EU. We don't know yet if you get out of the EU how you're going to do that. I'm going to talk about it a bit at the end. But let's assume that there is a Brexit, so you don't belong to the EU anymore. What can happen? We have just seen that international trade is beneficial, FDI is beneficial. Being part of the EU affects all these important variables. So being part of the EU seems to be beneficial. What about the cost? Let's see what the Brexit can create. Now, if you think about it, once you leave the single market, you are not my favorite partner anymore, probably, and then I will not trade with you as much as before. What I'm going to do, I'm going to increase the cost of trading for you. I'm going to increase the barriers. Barriers can be tariffs, so I'm simply put some taxes, for example, to increase the cost for you to sell to me, so I will not buy from you. That's very unlikely, by the way, it's not going to happen. The most important barriers are going to be what we call technical barriers, which are related to regulation of standards of products and manufacturers. Now, if you leave the EU and you still want to trade with the EU, which is your largest partner, you still have to comply with the standards that the EU will ask you. If you don't, you will trade less. As simple as that. This is another estimate that as I said, it's not very simple to give numbers, but this was in 2004, and their analysis was made only about FDI, and since there is this link between FDI, foreign direct investment, and growth, they were able to come out with this number, which says that if you leave the EU, you may end up losing around 2% of GDP in the long run. Now, 2% of GDP, remember GDP is more than 1 trillion, is a lot. It's not a small number. Eh? So, suppose you have a Brexit. Maybe, since we trade less with the EU, we can trade with others. The world is very big. We can find other partners. Is it likely? Maybe yes, maybe not. Let's see at the evidence. So the evidence tells me the following. Now, everybody talks about China, not only because it's not doing very well at the moment, but because it's still one of the largest economies in the world. So suppose that I can increase my trade with China. Now, what I see in the data is that European countries tend to trade a lot with China. So being part of the EU doesn't seem to restrict the ability for you to trade with other countries. So why leaving the EU should improve your ability to trade with these countries? It's not clear. Some others suggested the following: because we have a current account deficit, so we import more than we export, then we should simply leave the EU, and that would be good, because we will not run a current account deficit anymore. Now, this is economic nonsense. It's really nonsense, but let me give you an example. So you would like to export, so you would like to sell your goods abroad. But you would like to import, so you would like to consume goods also from abroad. Now, what is better? Is better to have more export than imports, so you sell more than you consume? Or it is better to have more imports than exports, so that you consume more than you sell? Now, think about yourself. What do you really want? You want to consume your goods, you want to have your TV, you want to have your mobile phone, you want to consume goods. Now, having a current account deficit is not a terrible thing at all. Why? Because you are actually consuming more that you could do without international trade, so you are better off because of that. The exports are the cost of your imports. And what's the problem with that? I mean, the UK has its own currency, it's called the pound. So let's assume the following. Suppose that the UK is so bad at everything, that all the goods that they consume in the UK are imported from abroad. Because abroad, they are better at everything than you. That can be, suppose. What is going to happen? Well, you're going to consume those goods. Why? Because they are cheaper. They produce it better than you, right? Now, what is the problem with that? By definition, the goods produced abroad are much cheaper than in the UK. You pay them with your pounds that nobody wants, because abroad, people with the pounds, what can they do? They cannot buy goods from you, because by definition, you are not good at doing it. So what is going to happen? It's going to happen that the value of the pounds will go down. You have an exchange rate, that will fix the thing. So there are market mechanisms that make sure that if there is a current account deficit, that can move away without the need of leaving the EU. So overall, if you believe in these stories, it seems to me that the cost of a Brexit in terms of trade and also FDI seems larger than the benefits. Therefore, that's the first thing that I'm going to say. So in terms of trade, it's beneficial. It seems beneficial. I didn't put any number. I'm trying to convince you. It seems beneficial to me for the UK to stay in the EU. Second topic, very hot topic, everywhere, in Europe as well at the moment, which is immigration. Now, immigration, if you think about it, is the movement of people from one country to another or from other countries to others. And it's a fundamental principle, or used to be a fundamental principle, of the EU single market, and now the Schengen Treaty is under some doubts, let's say. But, let's see. Does immigration from EU hurt the UK economy? If you are a fan of Nigel Farage, I'm sure that the answer is yes. But is it true? Let's look at the data. Let's form an informed opinion by looking at what the reality tells you. All right? So migration is pretty much like trade of goods and services. It's not a very nice metaphor, but it's pretty much the same. What does it mean? That people will tend to move to countries where they tend to be more productive. Productivity is associated with growth. More productivity, higher is the growth. I mean, that's common sense. If a worker can produce more and better than others, is more productive, it's going to produce more, it's going to create more income. As simple as that. So there's nothing very complicated here. Now, here I'm quoting a paper, a research, which is very interesting because it's not made for the UK. It's made for many, many countries. And what they found is that restricting immigration, so reducing immigration by, let's say, 10%, 5%, whatever it is, can cost up to 1.5% of the GDP of the receiving country. Now, 1.5% of the GDP, again, is a big number. Where does 1.5% come from? I'm going to tell you in a second. There is also this interesting paper, report by the Migration Advisory Committee in 2012, which they found no significant effect of EU immigration on UK unemployment. That doesn't mean much, but it simply means that more immigration doesn't really hurt the native workers in terms of their ability to find a job or not. Other pieces of evidence. Dussman, a professor at the UCL, found that immigration in the UK has little effect on the average wage, not only on the number of unemployed people, but also on their wage. There seems to be not much effect from immigration. There is, however, an effect that may be disturbing and some people may not like it, and it's related to the inequality of wages. What does it mean? That immigration tends to increase wage inequality. What does it mean? High-skilled workers will benefit from immigrants in the sense that their wage will tend to increase, but the low-skilled workers, the one in low-paid jobs, will tend to lose, and means that the scissor between the two is increasing, and that increases inequality. And some people may not like that. I understand. And this was particularly true since 2004, when the UK experienced a large inflow of immigrants from the newly assessed EU countries, Latvia, Poland, Czech Republic, and so on and so forth. Because most of these workers were indeed employed in low-skilled jobs. And this can hurt, in terms of wages, the native worker. However, we cannot use this evidence to say that immigration is bad. Why? Because we are looking just at one side of the tail of the distribution. There is also the other tail, which is the high earners, which they gain. Moreover, another piece of evidence provided by the same researcher, again, this is very common sense, by the way, found out that the fiscal impact of EU immigrants is positive. What does it mean? That they contribute more in taxes than they receive in benefits. But that makes a lot of sense. Many EU workers may be of high skills, all right? So they can get high wages. They can contribute to taxes more than they receive in benefits. There's nothing wrong with that. So it seems to me that all the fuss about these claims on benefits by EU immigrants is really a political agenda, which has some economics background if you think about inequality and so on and so forth, but it's truly, truly a political agenda more than an a sound economic reasoning behind it. Just to give you an idea, this is very visual. I mean, this is the number of people claiming benefits in UK, and this was in 2014. Here I say that the number of people that claims benefits from EU in February 2013 was around 2.3%. 2 years after is 2%. Now you can see what is EU. Is the last one. You cannot even see it. It's so small that you cannot really see it. So we are talking about peanuts. Right. Let's you can believe whatever you want about immigration, but if you see a picture like this, what are you going to do? I mean, if the problem is the number of claimants, this is the picture. What are you going to do? Now, suppose there is a Brexit. Now, Brexit can reduce immigration from EU by definition. I mean, you don't have to allow EU people entering in your country anymore. You can decide whatever you want. There is some evidence that says that, or suggests, that there is not a big gain in doing that. First of all, we're talking about small numbers. Second of all, we have just seen there is evidence that shows that EU workers tend to contribute more to the fiscal balance of the UK government than they receive in terms of benefits. So, but there is another reason why you want to do that. Okay? The baby boomers, the UK baby boomers, they are on the verge of retirement, so this means that there will be a need for workers, especially foreign workers. Now, substituting EU migration with non-EU migration may work. However, there is evidence that shows that non-EU migrants tend to have a negative impact on the fiscal balance of the UK. They tend to contribute less than they receive. So overall, if you think about immigration, I would say that it seems again that the cost of leaving EU seems larger than the benefits. What about regulation? This is a very big thing. So is the EU regulation a real burden for the UK economy? Some people may say yes, some people may say no. Let's look at some evidence and see what we can do. Now, I look at the data for the OECD in 2013, that's the only year, the latest year I had available, and I found out the following. Now, the Netherlands, which is in the EU, has the lowest product regulation in the OECD, which include all the EU countries, by the way. Product regulation is all the standards and regulatory laws that have to be applied when you produce goods and sell goods and so on and so forth, right? That can be a burden for firms. By the way, we regulate for a reason. It's not that we like to regulate because we like to mess with the market and tell the firms, oh, you should do this and you should do that. We normally regulate for a reason. We regulate because we think it's beneficial for customers and consumers and for the society. But apart from that, okay, so UK is the second less regulated country in terms of product regulation. Netherlands and Belgium, again, EU countries, have lowest barriers to entrepreneurship, which is another index of regulation. Labor market regulation in UK is the lowest among the EU countries. Now, what does it mean? Now, it seems to me, if I look at this, it seems to me that being part of the EU doesn't mean that you have a huge regulatory burden, because, I mean, some countries of the EU have less regulated market than the UK. The other thing that tells me something about this is that the UK is already not very much regulated. So suppose you want to leave the EU, how much low can you go in terms of regulation? Maybe a lot, maybe not. But it seems to me that if I look at something like that, you cannot really improve too much. You cannot simply tell the market, do whatever you want, I don't want to see. That's not the right approach. You're not going to do that. So the room of improvement is not very large. It's true that some regulations do impose costs that are relevant for UK businesses. But it's also true that being already a deregulated market, a larger deregulation will not happen, simply because there is no room for that. So the advantage of leaving the EU in terms of less regulation may not be as big as we may think. And there is another problem. You can have a very low regulated market, but if you leave the EU, you still have to comply with the regulation of the EU if you want to trade with them. So again, it doesn't seem a smart move. So overall, the cost of Brexit seems again larger than the benefits. So far, 3 out of 3. It seems no hope. Let's see the last one. Now here there is some hope, I think. Now the UK government contributes to the EU budget and is currently a net contributor. What does it mean? That they pay more than they receive back from the EU. Now, here we have something that we can discuss about cost and benefits. So this is a graph that tells you the net contribution over time of the UK since 1974 till 2014, and you can see that there is an increase over time. This happened especially after the credit crunch in 2008. We are talking about a number in 2014 that is 9.8 billion pounds. Now, it seems very large. What is this number relative to the total income of the UK in 2014? 0.4%. Still large, but 0.4%. This 0.4% that you are currently paying to the EU, which may increase over time up to 0.6% by 2020, is an opportunity cost. This is money that you give to the EU. You don't receive anything because this is a net contribution. So this money can be used in the UK for other things. However, if you think carefully about it, it's not so straightforward. Now, part of this, the big part of the EU budget, where this money go, is in famous policy, which is called the Common Agricultural Policy, which is simply a policy that tries to protect farmers in the EU, especially the French one. Maybe we like the French more than others, but anyway, it doesn't matter. By regulating this market, so by helping the farmers in EU, what you're going to do, you're going to increase the price of their products. So if we consume agricultural product from EU, we're going to pay more than a free market will let you pay. So that's a cost. That's a proper cost. However, part of the EU budget is used also in structural funds to improve the economic development of particular areas of the EU, in particular the poorest one. Now, structural funds may come to some areas in the UK, and they may be used to improve the welfare of the UK people in these particular areas. What about if we leave the EU? What is going to happen? So the first thing, you save the contribution, the net contribution. You don't have to pay it anymore. That's for you. You can use it. You also may decide not to buy products from the EU in terms of agricultural product and go for something cheaper. Why not? There is a problem with that. The problem is the following, that while the UK is a net contributor, Wales and Northern Ireland are not. So they receive funds under the Common Agricultural Policy. If that is scrapped, because the UK is out of the EU, these farmers may still need to be subsidized. So this is, again, money that the UK government must use to subsidize the farmers in this part of the UK. Moreover, if there are no more structural funds, you have to replace it. Maybe not, but you probably have to replace it. So there is still some cost from Brexit. But if you think about it, given the net contribution that the UK gives to the EU, we can say, finally, that the benefits of leaving the EU is probably larger than the cost. That's true, because you have a net save by doing that. Now, so far I look very generally at some topics, but I mean, all these costs and benefits also depends on the kind of structure or kind of agreement that the UK will have with the EU after a possible Brexit. And there are possible options. I look here at 3 possibilities, which are the main ones. So the first one is to have an agreement like Norway. That's possible. So Norway has a particular agreement with the EU. They access the single market. They don't have some of the regulatory burden, for example, from EU, but still they have to comply with the standards and regulation when they trade with the EU, and they cannot say anything about it. So they have to take them as given. If you are part of the EU, you can say something. You are part of the negotiation. You can try to modify these standards and regulation. Moreover, if you take this particular agreement, you still have to contribute to the EU budget. So what's the point? What's the point? So the question would be why Norway did something like that. And the answer is very simple. That depends on the productive structure of your country. Something like this can suit Norway, may not suit the UK. What about Switzerland? Again, Switzerland is very different from the UK, so you can guess that it's not a very good idea. But if that happens, UK and EU will have a set of bilateral agreement on specific sectors so that the UK can still access the US single market. But in the sectors that are covered by these agreements, the UK must still comply with the regulation of the EU. Finally, the last possible case is that you don't have any agreement, you're just part of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. You use this MFN case, which simply means the most favored nation, which means that you cannot really discriminate. But anyway, this is the simplest one of the possible cases. So the UK operates simply under WTO rules, no need to agree on common standard regulation with the EU. There's no need. Seems fine. However, the EU can increase external tariffs, so barriers to trade, with you, and so you will trade less with the EU. And we have seen at the beginning that trade is important, is beneficial, and you want to trade more, not less. So let me conclude by saying the following. Now, there is a huge political debate, but I think it is crucial that there is also a very thorough and well-developed economic analysis, an objective economic analysis that can support your opinion about how to answer the initial question. Now, it seems to me, by all the evidence that I provided, that the economic cost of a Brexit seems to be larger than the benefits. Now, I'm not going to give you a number, 0.3, 20, 55, I don't know. We can find out, but again, I mean, that's not the point. So the economic cost seems to be larger than the benefits. So from an economic point of view, if you are a rational person, cost bigger than benefits, not do it. So the cost in terms of trade and FDI reduction because you leave the single market will clearly offset and will be bigger, I guess, than the saving that you can make by not contributing to the EU budget. Independently of the possible arrangement between UK and EU, the one that I've just mentioned before, it appears to me that in all cases, the UK will not gain by leaving the EU. And the reason is because the opportunity cost is too high. The opportunity cost is given by the decrease in trade and FDI. Not only that, you also face the same regulation that you don't like and you don't have anything to say about it. That doesn't seem a very good deal. Now, this does not mean, let me be clear, I'm not saying that this is the perfect world. We live in the perfect world, we should not do anything, let's keep the status quo. That's not true. This does not mean that the EU institutions should not be reformed. Some of them should be. There are so many structural problems. They need to be solved. And I want to say something about, I just found it yesterday, by the way, something that Cameron said in January 2016, I think, in an interview to the BBC. And he said something to me that makes a lot of sense, which is Brexit is not the best answer. And probably he understands that. I mean, everybody can see that it may not be the best answer. But the best answer is for Britain to stay in a reformed EU. How much reform and how to reform it, that's an open question. But from an economic point of view, should the UK leave the EU? No. Thanks.